And thank you very much, Mark, and welcome to our session today on the rule tree. I am Marianne Burkett, and today we are going to be delving into the rule tree. If you are new to the MusicMaster software, when you open the software, you're going to see your default screen and however you have that set up. To access the rule tree, you can either go to the word Dataset and Rule Tree, or you can just use our rule tree icon, which happens to be a lightning bolt. I'm going to go ahead and click on the lightning bolt, opening the rule tree. As you'll notice, we have two sides to the rule tree. The left-hand side is where you put your active rules, and the right-hand side is where your available rule types are stored. And just to note, before I close it down, the info bar, if you have a lot of categories, you're going to want to organize your categories so they appear in the rule tree just like they do in the category info bar. So if you manipulate your category info bar, it's also going to result in a manipulation of the way your categories are listed here in the rule tree. I like to put my most used categories at the top here. So I'm just going to close down the info bar and giving us a little more real estate. And if you deal with the MusicMaster support team, we use screen real estate a lot, and that's why we close windows and open windows. Again, we have our active rules over here on the left-hand side of the rule tree, and the right-hand side is the available rule types. Now, we have our categories are listed here, and of course there's folders inside of those. But we have another area in MusicMaster called the All Categories area. It's a great convenient place to drop all of your overall rules that you want to apply to all categories. And at this point, I'm just going to go ahead and double-click on that, and you'll see by default, the All Categories folder would contain two folders, one for Unbreakable Rules and one for Breakable 1. If you'd like to add additional folders to the All Categories area, or any other category for that matter, there's an icon here, New Rule Folder. I can add as many rule folders as I want in the Breakable section. Unbreakable is unbreakable. You only get one choice there. So, and the reason you might want to use 1, 2, or 3 breakable folders is because in the breakable area, you can graduate your rules. So your most important breakable rules would be up here in Breakable 1, and your least important rules you can drop down into Breakable 3. And of course, it's going to try to pass all of the rules, but it's going to really focus on the ones that are closer to the top. I'm going to go ahead and double-click on one of these folders, and you'll see in my Unbreakable Rules. These are rules I absolutely, without a doubt, do not want the scheduler, the automatic scheduler, to break. Dayparting, artist keyword time separation, keeping artists away from themselves. I have a real pet peeve about females being back-to-back. This is my worst-case scenario, maximum in sequence of 2. And if I double-click on the rule, you can see the properties of the rule. Minimum sequence separation of 1. I have about 30% females in my library. Energy, the dead zone, I want to keep those apart by an hour. These are Unbreakable Rules, and they're going to apply to all the categories I want them to. And I'll explain that in just a second. Now I'm going to close down Unbreakable for a second and open Breakable 1. This is where the majority of my coding rules will live. And they're going to apply to all the categories I want them to apply to. And if you look at it, and this is kind of a short list. I've seen them much longer. It's kind of disorganized. It's kind of messy. So I need to clean house. And the way you can do that in MusicMaster is just to take these rules and drag them together. I want all my energy rules at the top of the rule tree because that's really an important rule to me. So I've got all these energy rules. And that's one way to kind of organize your rules and make it nice and neat. But there's other ways to organize the rules in the rule tree. And I'm going to go over to available rule types here. You see the first folder is called Special Rule Tree Items. Actually, there's one item in there, and it's called a rule group. You could think of it in a couple different ways, but right now I just want to use it as a storage bin. So I'm going to pull it over. I put my cursor on it, drag it over, and bring it up to the top of the rule tree, and you can see the red line there. That's where it's going to fall. And now I want to name it. This is where I want to put my energy rules. And I'm Hunter and Pecker on the keyboard here. I'm just going to say OK. And now you would think that these rules would be inside the rule group. They're really not inside the rule group yet. This is a common mistake with new users using rule groups. They think that the rule group, just because it's above the rules, has the rules in them. No, you've got to put the rules inside the rule group. And all you have to do to get the rules inside the rule group is to drag them up and drop them in. And you see how they indent. So I'm just going to bring those rules into the rule group and drop them in. Now, rule groups, in addition to being a great way to storage your rules and keep your rule tree a little neater, there's other things you can do with the rule group. I'm going to right-click on the rule group energy and go to the properties again. And this is the same screen we saw when we were creating the rule group. Now we can set this up. There's several different areas in this rule properties box. There's group mode. What to do with this group? The rule group fails when any of the included rule fails. The rule group fails when all the included rules fail, or you can test the rules as if they're not in a rule group. And for my personal taste, and everybody's different, I like to test the rules like they're not in a rule group. Okay? Now, there's availability. Now, the rule group is available when the rule group they're always tested. The rules are always tested in the rule group. The rules are only available in the automatic scheduler. Let me go back and explain that just a second. If you're running your automatic scheduler, it will pay attention to the rules. But the rules will be invisible in the schedule log editor, in the schedule editor. So you can use this selection, or you can do the vice versa. Rules are only available in the schedule editor, and the automatic scheduler can just fly with none of those rules. And then there's rules in this group are never tested. And when I first started in the software, I wondered to myself, why would somebody create a rule group and put rules in it and not want to test them? Well, if you create a rule group and you want to use it later, you don't want to have to, if you know what you want to do, but it's not time yet, like Christmas rules or special, you want to, turn off the rules so they're not tested until it's time. Then you just turn the rules on. Now, another thing you can do with a rule group is Daypart the rule group, basically. This is the time restriction area. Let's say I wanted to keep these energy rules and only wanted them to play in morning drive. Okay, I can create and modify a time restriction. And this is what a time restriction looks like all over the software. If you're going to Daypart a song, it's going to look like this as well. I want this rule group to only be applicable Monday through Friday, morning drive. So I'm going to X out all the hours that it's not applicable. And just like with any Windows program, you can select by dragging and pulling. I'm going to hit an X there, and I'm going to go ahead and X out the rest of the day, and I'm going to X out the weekend too. And that would be, these rules are only applicable for morning drive. And I have to save that as AM drive only, and hit OK. And now I have to apply it. So now this rule group will only be applicable for morning drive. Other things that you can do with the rule properties is filter out certain things. Say if you didn't want a specific artist to play, you would pull up the artist and decide which artist you didn't want to play in this area, or you did want to play in this area. You can add that. I'm going to cancel out of that right now. Also, you can say what categories you want to apply the rule group to. This is where you can turn categories on and off in the rules. So if you didn't want to, and I'm just going to click on the categories, and you'll see my categories. I don't want the rules to apply to promos, imaging, my whole category, or on categorized songs. And you know what? I really don't want them to apply to current or recurrent either. And because my recurrents and my currents are very small, they never butt up against each other, I want those to plot out as naturally as possible. So really all I want is the wraparound categories, the gold, new gold, and power core, those songs that wrap around my currents and recurrents. So that's the one way you can use the rule group and category filter. That's another way you can turn on and off the rules. Also, if you had like a 5 o'clock free ride, A lot of people have like some sort of 5 o'clock special or maybe a lunch hour, the blue plate special at lunch. And if you have a specific clock for that hour, you can actually apply a rule group to, instead of picking time restriction, you can just say, I only want the rules in this rule group to apply to this particular clock. So if I had an AA clock, I could just say, okay, I don't. So I'm going to cancel out of that. So that's one of the things and one of the ways you can actually turn rules on and off in MusicMaster using the rule group. So you could get into a very complicated rule group. You could have many rule groups. You could have different tempo for different times of the day and different coding rules for different times of the day. Say if you had a Sunday morning jazz program or something like that, you could apply different energy rules to that program than you do during the rest of the week. And that is the rule group. Now, there's another way in MusicMaster to turn these rules in the All Categories folder on and off. Now, if I want to go to the rule tree properties, MusicMaster rule tree, I can right-click on this word, MusicMaster rule tree, go to properties, or I can just click on the properties icon. In this icon, you're going to see how to display the rules. And then there's an all category bypass. Place a check mark in front of the categories that should not perform any of the rules in the all category rule folders. So in my particular database here, my hot AC, I don't want the rules to apply to current or recurrent, my promos, or my imaging. I don't want the scheduler to have to look at the rules when it's really not necessary. And it just takes longer, and it might create some unscheduled positions. So I really don't want to look at those two categories. Now, if there are any of the rules in the unbreakable all categories or breakable all categories rules that you want to put into either current or recurrent or promos or imaging, you would need to install those rules individually within those categories. So let's go ahead and close down all categories. And I'm going to go ahead and open up my currents and my recurrents for sample purposes. I right-click on it. I'm going to expand all. The only rule I have in my currents is dayparting. It's up there in the all categories area, but in the future, if I decide I'm going to play a current and I want to play the current only during the day or only at night, I've got dayparting to cover me here, and so I don't have to worry about that. Same applies to the recurrent category. I've got my dayparting rules. My current category is very, very small. It's only 5 songs. I've got a 1 search depth on it. I don't want rules. I want the category to plot out 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, with no interruption, because I know in a 24-hour day, if I have 1 song an hour with 5 songs, I am going to get absolute perfect rotations. My recurrent category is a little bigger than my current category. I have a search depth of 5. Somebody's not muted back there. I'm not sure who. I have a search depth of 5, and so I have 20 songs, 20 slots. I got to have a little wiggle room in this category. Why is that? Because there's certain things that I don't want to happen. Say I have Katy Perry in my recurrent category, and I also have her in my current category because Katy Perry is pretty well on fire right now. I need this to pay attention to the artist keyword time separation. I just go into the Unbreakable all categories, copy the rule, and paste it right into Unbreakable here. I might want to adjust this so it's maybe a little less than an hour 20 between the Katy Perrys, allowing this Katy Perry to schedule after this Katy Perry. I might want to cut that down a little bit. And I'll go into various ways about how to do that a little further down. But how do you decide what rules to use in categories that don't have any rules? And if I were to expand all my categories, I have very few rules going on right now. Now, in these categories, I might want to put some rotation rules, a minimum separation rule, some rules that are important to me, day parting, if they're cut off at the top in the properties. So how do you find that out? A lot of users, they get their abacuses out, or they can also go to the turnover analysis and take a look and see how the categories are plotting out at that point in time with the amount of clock calls you've got going on. I could look in a perfect world, one search depth, no rules, how a category might plot out. And look at the turnovers and hour exposure and suggested minimum rest or maximum rest. I digress. I'm going back to the rule tree. Because in the rule tree, we have something, and I like to term this as a piece of smoking hot brain candy. It's called the Rule Wizard. The Rule Wizard will help you set up your rule tree, especially if you're just getting started, or if you're the kind of programmer that likes to change the category size of his his smaller categories a lot, or even his larger categories. The Rule Wizard's going to give you some great recommendations, and I'm going to click on the Rule Wizard. Right now, the wizard always recommends a minimum rest if it is not there. I don't care about the A, okay? My A has got a one search depth. It doesn't have any place to go. It's going to play every 5 hours, okay? So I don't have to worry about that. My recurrent categories, no minimum rest rule. I need some kind of minimum rest rule in my B category because I do have a search depth, and I have some artist separation rules as well and day parting. So there's a couple ways you can get this rule in. I can use the up arrow. I can right-click on it, add it to my B recurrent, Unbreakable, Breakable 1, Breakable 2, wherever I want it. Or I can just double-click on it. I'm going to double-click on this one. And by default, when you do that, it shows up in the Breakable 1 folder. So to bring it up to where you need it, or if you want it in Breakable 1, you can keep it there. But I like these in Unbreakable. I don't want to fail this rule, okay? And you can do this with all of your categories. Now, besides minimum rest, what other kind of rules might you want in an individual category when you have all those rules in all categories? You want some hour rotation rules. And if you tab down in the Rule Wizard, he's going to recommend some stuff. Auto kick, day offset windows, play offset windows. And so if I just go ahead and double click on one of these play offsets and pull it into the category, it says play offset window, 23 plays, 1 hour. That's a little more a little more protection than I need right now. So I'm going to adjust this rule. I've already installed it. I'm going to close the Rule Wizard down for a second. Install the rule, okay? Play offset window, I probably just want to look back maybe 4 plays. And I want to make sure it moves a few hours. And I want to also put a day cutoff. I know how fast this category turns over. I want the day cutoff just over 7. So that's what I'm going to do there. And I'm going to pull it up there. So now with this recurrent category, it's pretty well set. I've got a minimum rest of 6 hours. I got a play offset window to protect it from playing around the last 4 plays. I've got artist keyword time separation, and I've got day parting. Remember, in my schedule properties, my pass order and search depth, I have a depth of 5. Now that I have minimum rest in there, I can probably up that a little bit. I could say, I want to give you a few more songs to achieve the rules that I have in this Unbreakable folder. So I might just take it up to 10, so 50%. And that's all you have to do there. So now I've decided that I've got all these Unbreakable rules, and I can do the same thing with all my other categories. Which brings me to another way you can decide what kind of rules to use in MusicMaster. If you see, by default, there are 3 folders in every category listed here. There's Optimum Goal Scheduling, Unbreakable, and Breakable 1, and of course you can add more breakable folders to it also. Oops. I hit the wrong button. But really for purposes of trying to figure out what kind of rules you use, especially when you're first starting out, you might want to consider using Optimum Goal Scheduling. Now next hour, Joe Knapp is going to be discussing in depth exactly how these rules work. You drag them into the Optimum Goal Scheduling folder, and they run, basically, in a nutshell, they run all the way through your search depth. And so in this particular category, they would run 100% through the search depth and back up to the best possible choice. But Joe's really going to get into depth about this and how to use these rules to cut down on unscheduled positions and editing time, and we all need lots of time in our day. I'm going to go to the next folder in available rule types and show you some rules and explain what they are and maybe help you decide what kind of rules to use in your database. Song history rules and hour rotation rules. They're in the same area. Now, song history rules, day parting. There's minimum rest and absolute maximum rest and maximum plays per day. There's also hour rotation rules, and I'll explain that in just a second. I'm going to go back to the no repeat. Do you remember when that all started? I think it started in the 80s. And I'm going to go ahead into all categories and pull in a no repeat rule. The no repeat rule was created by some wizard programmer. I'm not going to mention any names. I think it was in the 80s. And this is what this rule does. You pull it in and you call it whatever you want to call it. The no repeat fails when a record is scheduled more than once in the restricted hours during the same week. So if you have a no repeat work day, you're going to need 5 no repeat rules Monday through Friday, one for Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. And so we're going to call this one no repeat Monday. Now right there, now there's no time restriction on it. So really, I either want to pick one or modify. And I think I've got a no repeat Monday all set up here. And we'll look at it right now. So this rule is only applicable between 9 and 5 on Monday. And so if I wanted that to apply, I would just go ahead and apply that. Week start day Monday. I've also heard people doing no repeat work weeks. Got to have a big library for that. But let me modify this day part, and I'll show you what one of those looks like. A no repeat work week would be like this. You'd only need one. Oops. You'd only need one. I'm going to delete that. So this rule is good all the way through. So you better have some deep categories and maybe do a little recycling in the middle of the night for that. But it works very well, and it will not break the rule in the automatic scheduler. I'm going to cancel out of that and cancel out of that. So that's the no repeat rule, so it's available to you. Going into the hour rotation rules, and I'm just briefly going to explain how these rules work and how they might work for you. Here we are in new gold. If I didn't want a song to repeat the next day in the same hour, I would bring in the day offset window. I would say, I want you to look back 1 day and 1 hour, okay? And I can test past plays or past days or not. So I just hit OK. And so now that's what that rule is going to do. If you wanted to look back 2 days and cumulatively add those days on, you would just say 2 days, 1 hour. An exclusive day offset window. Now let me bring this into light a little bit. A lot of people ask me what that is because it sounds good, doesn't it? And it really is a good rule to use. If you have, say I'm going to bring Sunday morning jazz or a gospel program on Sunday mornings, and you run that for a couple of hours every Sunday morning, you might want to bring this rule in and say, I want you to check back 7 days. It's only looking at the 7th day. It's looking back 1 week. And I want you to move the song to another hour, please. Okay? And you can go, I want you to move it to another 45 minutes, hour 45 minutes away. And test past plays only or past days only. And so that's the use of the exclusive day offset window. You can put 3 days in there. It would only look back to the 3rd day. It would look in between just that 3rd day. So I'm going to cancel out of that right now. And now the sliding rules. Sliding day offset window. It works like a day offset window. And let me just explain for a second. The day offset window. If a song plays at 10:05 today, the day offset window will not allow it to play in the 10 o'clock hour tomorrow, okay? It doesn't stop it from playing at 9:59, and it does not stop it from playing at 11:01. It stops it from playing in the 10 o'clock hour. The sliding day offset window works a little differently. With that very same setting, if I were to go 1 day, 1 hour, if it played at 10:05 today, tomorrow, it would not be able to play at 10:06 or 11:04. Does that make sense? So it's looking around a window of a time instead of just at a specific hour. So, if you want to keep something away for a couple of hours and a couple of days, you can certainly get very specific, with your time here with the sliding day offset window. And you can also use your test past days only. Now let's say I have a whole slew of day offset windows, 1 day, 1 hour, 2 days, 1 hour, 3 days, 1 hour. We also have something called the day exclusion mask. This rule, the exclusion masks that we have available to you in MusicMaster, really can replace several of these rules. Let's just go into, I'm going to set this at 7. Forgot to save it, 7-1. Okay, 2 days, 1 hour. I'm going to bring in the day exclusion mask and show you. Here's today. Here's the play. So I put an X there. I don't want it to play 1 day, 1 hour, and 2 days, 1 hour. And I'm going to go down to 7, the 7th day, and say, I don't really want it around there either. Test past days only, and you can call it what you want to. You can name it. And that can replace. Now I can cut these rules out. I don't need them anymore. Cut. So now this looks much neater, and it does the same thing as all those rules. So that's the explanation of what an exclusion mask can do. Just cuts down on the number of rules. Still does the same thing, but it's a little easier to deal with. Play offset windows are a little different than day offset windows. The difference between a play offset window and a day offset window is day offset is looking at days, and play offset windows are looking at plays. So if you had a large category, say, that turned over every 14 days or every 10 days or every 5 days, you may want to just look at the plays instead. So last time it played was at 3 o'clock in the afternoon on Christmas Day. Okay, and I'm just going to take a Christmas song, Silent Night, Stevie Nicks, played at 3 o'clock in the afternoon on Christmas Day 2008. And I want to check one play, and I want to move it 1 hour. Now, if I don't put this max days in here, it's going to protect that song from last year when it plays again in 2009 or tries to schedule again. So make sure when you do your play offsets that you do your max days as well. Pretty important there. Testing back a year is some people might want to do it, not me personally. And you can also test past days only. I'm going to cancel out of that. So that's the difference between play offsets and day offsets. They're looking at plays, not days. Going down the list of rules here in our rotation rules, we've got something called shift rotation. And if I drag the rule in and drop it into the Unbreakable folder, I can go ahead and decide on how many shifts I want this song to go through before it comes back around to play again. Okay? I can also play it in a different hour than the previous play in the current shift. So if you had a play offset win, if it was coming back 2 days later or whatever, and the play offset said, I don't want it to play in the same hour, you could almost replace that if it was a 2-day, 1 hour play offset with this shift rotation rule as well. You can access your shift editor here. And that's one of the ways you can access the shift editor. Right now I have 4 shifts set up in my database. A lot of people go, why isn't there anything selected in the middle of the night? Well, I also use gold recycling, and next week Joe is going to go into depth about gold recycling. And so in my gold categories, I recycle into these hours, and I really don't want the scheduler thinking that's a shift that counts. Not that the overnight shift doesn't count. Of course it does, but the songs that I pick up from in the middle of the day here have no other place to go but here. So it could actually cross over several shifts and have to be forced into here. So I really didn't want to use that as a shift. I could always put a shift in there if I want to, just by selecting and typing in the shift and hitting enter. But for my purposes, no shift for you. Okay? You can name the shifts. You can call them what they are, overnights, middays, mornings, whatever. But usually just by looking at the map, you know what they are. You can also set a max day. max days on this. So if after 14 days a song gets hung up for some reason or another, whether it's artist separation or some kind of other rule that you've got going on there, you can set up a maximum day. And so if it hasn't played in 14 days, it can go ahead and play again in that same shift in the very same hour. So I would just set that at 14 or so and just let it go there. Let me explain what auto kick is. A lot of people ask me, what is auto kick? Is that, is that going to protect yesterday the same hour? Yes, it is. But let me explain. I'm going to pull it into the rule tree and drop it in. We have three selections in auto kick: window size full hour, half hour, or quarter hour. It drops a record from the schedule queue if they played in a window around the current time the previous day. So let me use my analogy here. I am a place kicker for the Dallas Cowboys, and I have the ball, and I have just hit, hit the ball. I am such a girl. I just kicked the ball downfield, and now it has to wait to come all the way to the top again or come back to me. So basically when you use auto kick, you could lose a spin. If you're running it in your currents or your recurrents, you might lose a spin, and it might result in some little crazy rotations. It will protect it in the window here, but it also might, you might lose a spin. So keeping track of your spins, and if you're a reporting station, you might want to keep in mind that this rule is going to take that in this full hour, quarter hour, or half hour into consideration and boot that song out of the schedule order, sending it to the back of the order. And you can also ignore plays from other categories in this rule. If you don't want a song to play in the same hour the next day, and that's basically what you want, if you don't want to lose spins, you would use a day offset window 1-1. 1 day, 1 hour. I'm going to close the song history rules down right now. We're about 35 minutes into the hour, and I'm going to explain some other types of rules here. We have text field rules in MusicMaster, and I have media set up there, and I'm just going to click on this. And what you can do, remember back in the day when we had CDs or vinyl in the studios, and say if you had a TM Century library with many different cuts from many different artists on the same CD, of course you couldn't play that CD back to back, because then there would be a pause, you'd have to wait for it to re-queue, and there would be dead air. So what we would do is time separate that, and you can just pull time or title separation in. Another kind of rule is a numeric field rule. So if you have research scores in your library, you can actually, and I like to use, and I'm going to go to the all categories area right now. Oops, expand. And I think I have score in here, and I'm going to go ahead and just double click on that. And so what I've got here is an hour target. So I want to make sure within this hour I get a specified score type. So you have average value, and you can run that up and down, and your tolerance level. As you see, I go higher, my tolerance gets bigger, and if I go lower, the tolerance is smaller. So really, if I only wanted a test score of 5 to play for this particular rule, I would shut this down, say I want it to be at least a 5, and that's probably a little unreasonable. So we're going to put it someplace in the middle, and so I want my minimum test score in this hour to be 3.9 and the maximum to be 6.5, and hit OK. So that's the power of the numeric field rules. So if you're using test scores, and a lot of people do use research scoring, you can use that as a testable field and throw your scores in there, and then you'll be able to control them a little bit. Going to keyword field rules, they are what they are. I'm going to open up artist keywords and explain just a little bit about those. Artist keyword time separation. When you put artist keyword time separation in, this is basically just how long in this category the artists have to be separated from themselves anywhere in the database. So if I set this at 1 hour and 21 minutes, that would be my overall rule. And so my auto setting. There's also another rule I get asked a lot about, and the adjusted time separation. People go, what on earth is that? Well, let's say with my recurrent category, I'm going to cut this rule out. Cut, cut, cut. And I'm going to throw this rule in, adjusted. Right now, my overall rule for all categories Unbreakable is 121. So I'm going to put 121. Actually, let me cancel out of that first. First, I want to do 60% of that 121. I'm going to put the 121 in here and hit OK. And so now my auto separation is 49 minutes in this category because I've got, you know, like Coldplay, Katy Perry in current, and I also have them in recurrent, and I really don't want to disrupt the flow of the recurrent category. I want to make sure that these things schedule out. And I can live with this. At 60%, I can live with a 49-minute separation on Katy Perry. So that's what that does. You can also use a regular keyword time separation and just say, okay, for this category, I want 49 minutes. Okay? It does the same thing. It just gives you a percentage. So that's an explanation of that. Keyword hour rotation is a basic rule, and it basically will, you can go, I want to make sure that the keyword, so Katy Perry, tomorrow doesn't play in the same hour. That's all. And you can test past days only. You can do 2 days, 1 hour, 2 days, 7 hours. That would be completely unreasonable for my library anyway. But you can do the test past plays and ignore individual keyword settings for this rule. And as I look at my time, I think I have time just to dive into that. Individual keyword settings, where do you find them? Go to Related and the keyword editor. Pick the kind of keyword you're interested in looking at and look. The auto setting here is the auto setting in the rule tree. So if it's clicked on auto, it's going to pay attention to the what's in your rule tree. You can also individualize separation for various groups. I have Alanis Morissette set at 3 hours and 10 minutes. I have the Alanis sound at 45 minutes because there's other artists that kind of sound like her, and I want to make sure they contain that keyword and that they can stay away from her. I don't want her in the same quarter, her sound in the same quarter hour. So you can customize your artist keywords and the time between those plays. Title keywords are much the same. However, MusicMaster title keywords are really only needed for covers. So if you have 2 versions of a song, you would want to apply a title keyword to it. And then you would put some sort of time separation rule in the Unbreakable folder in the various categories where you have title keywords like Christmas. If you decide you can live with 2, if you have 45 silent nights in your Christmas category, it's in power. Your time separation on that song is probably going to have to be lower than it is on other titles. So you would want to put a keyword in there and then put a time separation of some sort in the category or in all categories. I'm going to close down the keyword field rules and then go to the meat and potatoes of MusicMaster. And this is your attribute field rules. A lot of people go, well, especially if they're brand new to music scheduling or they're brand new to the software, they go, where are my sound codes? Where's my tempo codes? They're all in attributes in the field rules. And you can create attributes, and I'm going to go back to the word related here. You can create them right here in the attribute editor. I'm not going to go in there right now, but you can create them on the fly as you look through and say, I think I need an extra energy. I have 5 right now, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm going to double click on this. I've got dead zone, low, normal, high, and rubber room for my energy, but I need 6. I need like a insane asylum, which is close to rubber room. Okay, so how do you decide about these rules, and what are they? So let me go into all categories where my coding rules live. In MusicMaster, we've got some pretty strong and powerful tools to help you decide what rules to use. We've got Segway Protection, which is basically, and I could drag it in, but it's already there, so I'm going to just double click on it. Segway Protection is going to protect these things by 1. I don't want my dead zones to fall up against each other. I don't want them to fall up against the low either, the low energy, and I don't want low to fall into low. I don't want my regular energy to fall up against it. I want a lot of variance in my energy here. So anytime you see an X, it's restricted. You can test forward. You can test backward. You can ignore record types. And what I mean by that is your non-music. So you certainly don't want, unless you've got your non-music coded with energy, you probably would want to put ignored record types non-music. You can cut the rules off at the hour. If you have sweep markers in your clocks, and we've gone over clocks last week, and if a sweep marker is basically a way to cut a rule off or to display it differently in your paper log or in the log editor. In between break elements and record types. So you can rule cut off non-music too. So just to explain there, now if you hover over any of these blank ones, it's allowed to play back-to-back. So the Segway Protection is your basic back-to-back. So right now, so we've got that done. We could also do a MinMax Value rule. Bring that in real quick. The value in this field must be in the specified range. I could say I want a minimum. I'd say if I had a rule group for morning drive, I wanted my minimum to be 2, and of course my maximum, I wouldn't have to worry about it because maximum is maximum. And I want to ignore this rule, the non-music. So now in morning drive, no ones will be allowed at all if I use this rule. I'm going to cancel out of that. We have a MinMax Step. So if you didn't want a 5 going into a 1, you would put a MinMax Step in there, and vice versa. We have hour opener values. So if you wanted to open the hour with a 4 and maximum 5, it's an option. So you can do that at the hour marker. And you can do sweep opener values and record sum. So if I were to put a record sum in there, do not allow any combination of the specified number of records where the sum of the values in the field is outside the specified range. In a nutshell, what that means, I'm looking at 3 records, and within the 3-record range, I have a scale of 1 to 5. I want my minimum to be 6, and I want my maximum to be 15. So I want to make sure, actually, I want my minimum is 7 because I don't want two 2s back to back. 2, 2, 2 is 6. So in a 3-record set, this is what you would use. We've got, again, there's our target rules here, and a lot of people like those. I'm going to go to our target here for energy and pull in. And, of course, if you wanted the energy up and you wanted to lower the tolerance, you would do that. I'm going to cancel right now. We also have, sweep targets, our targets, so sweep markers there. Patterns, so you could say I want a 5, 5, 2, 1. Or, disallowed patterns. I don't want a 1, 1, 2, 2. Now I'm going to go into the specific rules now in energy. Oops. And go into dead zone. Right now I've got an hour separation, and that's an unbreakable rule. And title and time separation, other code time separation. But how do you decide on how far apart to put something in MusicMaster? You can guess, and I welcome you to do so, or you could use something called library analysis. You can look at your library, and I've got a couple of groups set up here that I set up for my library. I just want to look at my 3 gold categories and go, what's my overall energy in these categories? And I go, so I open up the categories all together. I right-click on the word energy, and I go to library analysis. This is how I personally decide how far apart or how close together my energy values need to go. I've got a pretty balanced library as far as my mid-energy range is concerned, 31, 31, 22%. So I might have to play 2 of these back to back, 2 of these, maybe 3, 2 or 3, 2 or 3. I could probably separate by 1 here on the highs. Rubber room, I only have 8% or so, and I could probably separate those by a measure of time. And dead zone, I selected an hour. Now that might create a little problem, but I set it up and I've excluded the current categories in my library. So just to touch on why you would decide to do a certain thing, definitely look at your library analysis if you're interested in programming like that. And I know lots and lots of people are using the power of our library analysis to set up their rules now. We have a maximum in sequence rule. Now, this is available in all the various rules. sound code, mood, roll. Okay, let's go to roll. I'm going to open up roll. I'm going to close down energy here. I have a Segway Protection, duet, female, male group, male, and female group. I open these up one at a time. Maximum and sequence. Now, you can use this rule in a couple of different ways. You could say, I want 2 in a row, separate by 1. I could say 1 in a row, separate by 10. Same rule, use it in a complete opposite way. I like to use this rule. Instead of, a time separation rule or title separation rule, this does the same thing, basically. So I'll use this rule a lot. You can rule cutoff, the hour, sweep, break, or record type also with this. Now, if I don't want my duets to play up against my females or my female groups, because that is my personal pet peeve, I want to other code title or time separate. So I'm going to pull this rule in and go, I want to look at female and female group, and I want to keep these things apart by at least 1 record. I'm going to only test the music, and if I wanted to rule cutoff, I could do that. And so that's how I would decide to use that rule. If I want to keep a code away from itself or other things, you would use your maximum and sequence, time, title, other code, time, or title separation. If you have a lot of one thing, you can have a minimum or maximum quota per hour. And I just went over this with a client the other day. He wanted to make sure he had several of a certain sound code landing in the hour, and it didn't look like it was happening, even though 30% of his library was that code. And I said, well, we need to set up a min-max quota per hour rule here, because then you could go, I want a minimum of 2 and a maximum of 3, and say, okay. And I could use it, instead of saying an actual number, you can also use the percentage. So I want a minimum of 15% in this hour and a maximum of 20%. Oops. Sorry, I bumped into my microphone. And say okay. So that's the power of the min-max quota per hour. If you have a min-max quota per hour and you want to keep those codes apart, you'll need to time separate them as well. So if I had a min-max quota per hour of 15% and 20% of female, and I didn't want them butting up against each other or to be close, I would time separate them. So basically, in a nutshell, that's the kind of power of the rules you have here. We also have not allowed. So if I have morning drive, I don't want duets in my morning drive. I would create a rule group and put this rule in that rule group for morning drive. Duets, no duets allowed in morning drive. That makes really no sense, but some people might not want to listen to duets in the morning. So that's the rule you would put not allowed. And you'll see if you didn't want your high tempo records to play in the middle of the night, you would want to put a rule group in there, time restricted, and say, I don't want 5s to play in the middle of the night. Going back down the list of rules here, got a few more minutes here. We've got yes-no field rules. And I have, in my library, I have a yes selected or a check mark in several of my records. And I have, these are power titles, and I have yes-no. And I want to make sure that I have a minimum, maximum quota per hour of my power titles. And so I'm going to put this rule into Unbreakable. I want to make sure that I have a minimum of 5 or 6 power titles in a 13-song hour, say. That's the average in contemporary radio, I guess. Or you could do a percentage and say, I want half of my records in the hour to be a power title. And so that's how you'd use a yes-no record. You could also separate those by time or title and maximum and sequence or whatnot. Format clock rules, just what they are. Format clock, you've got hour timing, segment timing, format clock filters, and session filters. If you want any of the things in your clocks that you've set up previously, and if you watched last week's session on clocks, you would understand what the hour timing was, segment timing was. And if you didn't watch it last week, you can access last week's session about clocks online on the MusicMaster website. But if you want any of your format clock rules to work, you have to bring them into the rule tree. You have to allow them to play. So in wrapping it up here, the MusicMaster rule tree, we've got the wizard available to you when you want to figure out what to do, and you can do that every week. If you're having problems in unscheduled positions, I would encourage you to use your wizard. See what he says, because he's pretty smart. Smoking hot brain candy is what I call him. And we have a print function as well. So if I wanted to print the entire rule tree, I just hit OK, and I can actually print this out, and I'll print a preview right now so you can see what the printed report would look like. And it just takes 1 second, and I've got 4 pages of rules. And of course, this rule tree is now a complete mess because of the presentation, but that's okay. I was just doing a lot of this stuff for sample. And so you will see exactly what rules you have where. And I can exit out of that. Anyway, it's about time for a break, and the MusicMaster rule tree session for me is over. Stay tuned. Coming up at the beginning of the hour, Joe Knapp, our CEO and founder of MusicMaster, is going to be doing an in-depth session on advanced rule tree functionality and our optimum scheduling goals. And it's going to be an awesome session. I'm staying, and I encourage you to as well. Anyway, I'm Marianne Burkett, a music scheduling consultant, and thank you very much for tuning in today.